In the last class, we spoke about the 4 periods in the history of Indian philosophy. The 4 periods are the Vedic period, the epic period, the Sutra period, and the scholastic period. In this class, we shall see a bit about each of these periods. What is the Vedic period? What is the importance of the Vedic period? What is the importance of the epic period? And then the Sutra period and the scholastic period. The Vedic period. This period can be regarded as the dawn of civilization. So something great is happening in this period, Vedic period. So this is going to be the most ancient one, because this period, if you can go back to the first class which we have said, the whole Indian philosophy is based on that Vedas. They are the ancient scriptures, and accordingly it is the whole philosophy is divided into 2, orthodox and heterodox or unorthodox. Orthodox, those systems or the schools which accepts the authority of Vedas, the other schools which do not accept the authority of Vedas. So based on the authority of Vedas, the ancient scripture, the philosophy is divided. So in the Vedic period, we can see what the importance of it is that is, they are the ones, or the Vedas are, the ancient scriptures are in this period. So this period tells us about the man who is maybe unlettered man becoming lettered. So the Prakrit man is made to Sanskrit man. The Vedic period covers the rise and development of the Aryan culture and civilization. So from an uncivilized to the civilized. So that is the period, that is the Vedic period. And the scriptures which are found in this period, they become the most ancient and an authority which is not questioned, because there is no proper guidance with regard to when they were composed. The fact is that these ancient scriptures, that is the compilation of that, it has come from much the time immemorial, and these we have from the meditation of the rishis and people or acharyas, gurus. They have gone into the deep forest to spend their time in meditating over the important or fundamental questions about life, and what they have found or they realized, they began to compose in hymns, and these hymns were collected together and they have become the real source of the Vedas. And these hymns which are codified later on, not at that time, and they were the ones which we have as the time passed on. We have those the manuscripts or the collection of the hymns as the very source of the scriptures. So the Vedas we found, or the period, the Vedic period is that. So from the uncultured person or man, he becomes cultured. It consists of the 4 Vedas, namely. So this Vedic period gets its importance from the 4 Vedas, very important. Rig Veda, Yajur Veda, Sama Veda, Atharva Veda. And these are the very important, or the 4 Vedas which we have. And each of these Vedas is again divided into 4 parts. Each of the Vedas, that is there is Samhitas, Brahmanas, Aranyakas and Upanishads. So in all the 4 Vedas we have these 4 parts. So each Veda, be it Rig Veda, Yajur Veda, Sama Veda, Atharva Veda, 4 Vedas are very important ones. And the Vedic period, what we see is the formulation of these. And how these 4 Vedas are classified into the hymns which are composed by the rishis and acharyas and gurus. in their meditation what they have received, which they have orally transmitted to generations. Later on they were written down and codified, and some of them we have. Not all of the hymns which were sung or transmitted orally to the Shishyas or the disciples, all of them we don't have, but at least some of them. So later on when it came, that is, so many manuscripts were lost, and therefore later period they were codified, and according to the hymns or the using certain standards, they were codified into and put it into four or the Vedas, that is the Rig Veda, Yajur Veda, Sama Veda, Atharva Veda. And each of these Vedas, they have got four parts, that is the Samhitas, Brahmanas. Samhitas means the mantras, and the Brahmanas, the ritual rites, then Aranyakas, the thoughts, and Upanishads, that is the real philosophy. So all these four Vedas will have these four parts. So that is about the Vedic period, how important it is, and the time is between 1500 BC to 600 BC is the time period, quite an ancient time. Those times, as they went into meditation, no script was existing at that time. So what they received as an inspiration or as a revelation, that was only they could put it into some kind of expression through their words. And this was communicated to the immediate disciples, and they to the next, and went on for a long period of time. So in the beginning, the only mode of transmission was through mouth to mouth, through words, and that's oral transmission only. So later on only the written form of it, and then the script came much later. So by the time the script came, most of these orally transmitted messages, they were already some lost, some distorted, some people do not remember all of them. So maybe in bits and pieces only. However, whatever they could really preserve, they did it in really literally in writing down once the script came. And those are the ones which we have, which forms the very basis of the four Vedas. So in the Vedic period, we have the emergence of the four Vedas: Rig Veda, Yajur Veda, Sama Veda, Atharva Veda. What is the importance of Vedas? Vedas are the basic or the very important scripture, and whose authority is accepted in the Indian philosophy. And those systems which accept the authority of the Vedas, they are classified as orthodox group or Astika systems, that which accepts the authority of Vedas. And those groups and the philosophy and the schools of thought which do not accept the authority of Vedas, they are called heterodox or unorthodox or Nastika school of philosophy, which do not accept the authority of Vedas. So Vedas become the basis of the division between the two groups, major groups of division in philosophy: orthodox and unorthodox, or Astika and Nastika systems. Now, what did things happen in the epic period? So from the Vedic period we come to the epic period. The moment we hear about epic, what comes to mind is the two great epic, that is Ramayana and Mahabharata. So these were the product of this period, the epic period. The epic period is the development of the early Upanishads and Darshanas. So what has happened in the epic period? The development of Upanishads and Darshanas is concerned with the enriching of the intellect of man. So now man begins to speculate, begin to think, and trying to find an answer to the various questions he has. So there emerges these two aspects of the Upanishads and Darshana. That is, the Darshana is the philosophy that is as you perceive, as you see. So that darshana is not mere seeing, but much more internalized or interiorizing, getting into yourself. So a philosophy which thinks about the very existence of man, the reasons where, and so many other questions. So certain questions to which man begins to intellectually answer to the question. So this paved, the darshanas paved the way for the growth of systems in philosophy. So in the epic period we have the two, that is Upanishads and Darshanas. Darshanas paved the way to different philosophies. Man began to think, and this thinking process keeps on and on. There is no end of that. So philosophy is a science which engages your mind or the intellect in order trying to find an answer to various questions, your intellectual capacity to grasp. So man began to ask questions. What is man? What is self? What is God? What is world? So different answers were coming in. Accordingly, different schools also came up. So that is the real development which has come in the epic period. So we have the Vedic period and then the epic period, literally some contribution of human endeavor. The invaluable Dharma Shastras, the great treatise on ethical and social philosophy, are the gifts of this period. So once the human mind began to think, or persons began to set that of their thinking activity, then so many different philosophies began to emerge. So we have the Dharma Shastras, that is the greatest treatise on ethical and social philosophy. Apart from the extraordinary philosophical doctrines, the non-systematic and non-ethical literature also appeared in this age. So not only philosophy, but other literature also. That is non-systematic and non-ethical literature appeared in this age of epic period. The great epics Ramayana and Mahabharata are the gifts of this period. The period is very significant because it witnessed the rise and development of Shaivism and Vaishnavism, the two major trends in the philosophy on which we have so many schools of thought, that is Shaivism and Vaishnavism, as well as the growth of Jainism and Buddhism, that is considered as the heterodox religious philosophies, as they do not endorse the authority of the Vedas. So we have certain religion or the school of philosophy which is supporting or accepting the authority of Vedas, and which do not accept the authority of Vedas. So from the Vedic period, when we come to the epic period, we see the development is much more. So Vedas are, or what was there, they were taken or accepted them as an authority without much questioning. They were codified and placed into 4 Vedas: Rig Veda, Yajur Veda, Sama Veda, Atharva Veda. So these became the very source of knowledge, information all about what had happened before. So they became the authority on which the division is made, the Indian philosophy division as orthodox and unorthodox, or Astika systems and Nastika systems. Now that is the authority, that's the Vedic period. From the Vedic period we come to epic period. So epic period is a time when human endeavor, thinking of human being, and there we have, that is different schools of philosophy growing up or coming, a mushrooming growth of that. So as each person began to think, and they were bright in the intellects, and they began to find different ways and means of understanding the reality. That is, what is that reality, or what is the concept of God? And to such, or the different thoughts were employed, and then we have the Upanishads and Darshana philosophy all coming up at this time. And then we have the growth of the different, that means the literature began to flow, not just the orthodox literature, but unorthodox and unethical or symbol literature began to flow in, and maybe more writing about what the understanding of the persons. Then we have the growth of, or the coming of the Shaivism and Vaishnavism, two major groups which again got divided into different sect. So that is the one effect which we find in the epic period. At the same time, we have the growth of the schools, that is of the Jainism and Buddhism, which totally negate the authority of Vedas and are classified as the heterodox religion or the unorthodox group. So that epic period is very much of so much of human activity that is going on there. From the Vedas, that is accepted as the authority, and that is transition or how the Prakriti man became more or little more civilized or Sanskritized. So there is a lot of knowledge now, information is available, and from there we come to the epic period wherein human endeavor to dwell more or delve more into, ask more questions into the phenomenal world. What is this world? What is God? What is man and his existence? So many things coming into question, and thus we have different philosophies that is emerging, and where we have the Darshana philosophy and Upanishad coming in this page. From that is the epic period, we move on to the Sutra period. So when human endeavor began to think, and then lot of things were written, and volumes of things were written, commentaries and then expositions. So their understanding of the whole phenomenal world, different aspects, so it became so bulky. So who will be able to remember all that? So they had to find certain apt sayings which will very short can remember but conveys the entire meaning of all what is written. So that is called the Sutra period. Some short sentences which will definitely reveal the entirety of what is written. So to condense all what is mentioned in the book, you have a Sutra Vakya. So by saying that, you are in fact telling the entirety of the philosophy. And such apt words or Mahavakyas are also said to be in this one, and therefore those condensing is very, very difficult unless you have a grasp of the entire matter what is contained in the book. So persons who began to condense them and put it into small short sentences. So Sutra period, over a period of time, Vedic literature and the subsequent works grew massive scale. The great scholars made efforts to safeguard the rich heritage. That is how illustrious sutras were written. So these great masters, they were trying to find ways and means of preserving such a vast volume of written material and information. So they were trying to compress it into. The sutras are mostly epigrammatic sentences in the verse form. They helped to preserve and transmit the treasure of philosophies expressed in the voluminous works. So if a person had to read the whole work that is written, it would take many, many years, and all the people were not able to or have the access to that. So what the scholars and the great persons who could condense them, they made it into small short sentences, but without losing the meaning of or what that is referred in the voluminous work, Tattvamasi or Aham Brahmasmi. So these words, or these are the short sentences, but a profuse meaning it has got. Great meaning. Aham Brahmasmi, I and Brahman, one and the same. That is the highest ideal to be reached, and the knowledge. So in the short sentence, the big philosophy, or all what is written about the relation between I and the Brahman, that is contained there. The true identity of a human being, that is it. Tattvamasi, thou art that. And that is going to be such great saying, which is time immemorial. That means, and also a person, easily we can remember that saying. But the philosophy behind it is so vast and very great. And that these are the ones called the Sutra period. So Sutra period, we will see people trying to compress the voluminous work into short sentences, easy to remember. And you don't have to go through the entirety of the philosophy, but enough to explain what is the such words. They help to preserve and transmit the treasure of philosophies expressed in the voluminous work. So from Sutra period we move on to the scholastic period. In the Sutra period, one or two things are to be said. Bhadrayana, that is also called Vedavyasa, one of the greatest scholars. Bhadrayana wrote Brahma Sutra, also known as Vedanta Sutra. The sutras laid foundation of different systems of philosophy in India. So this Sutra Vakya, sutras, based on that we have different philosophies also coming into India. The 6 orthodox systems based on the sutras are Vaisheshika, Samkhya, Yoga, Purva Mimamsa and Uttara Mimamsa. That is Vaisheshika, Nyaya, Samkhya, Yoga, Purva Mimamsa and Uttara Mimamsa. And these are the 6 orthodox group of philosophy based on the sutra. And sutras are written by great scholars because they need to know the entirety of the philosophy, and in order to help others to grasp, understand what is contained in the voluminous work, they started composing this Sutra Vakyas. And that's what we have in the Sutra period, or this period specially dedicated for condensing the voluminous work, so that need not go through, nobody may have the time and patience and that capacity to sit and read the whole of that philosophies, the large works which were written on various topics. So this condensation or Vakya, Sutra Vakyas or Sutra period, what they did was to try to reduce them into short sentences. And thus we have the Sutra period, in that we have a great scholar, Bhadrayana, also called Vedavyasa, who wrote the Brahma Sutra, also known as the Vedanta Sutra. And based on that, we have number of philosophy that is being developed in India. From this, here we come to the scholastic period. So we have 4 periods in the history of Indian philosophy, that is the Vedic period, Epic period, Sutra period and the scholastic period. And scholastic period is the last one. This period coinciding with the Sutra period witnessed distinguished scholars like Shankaracharya, Kumariliya, Madhavacharya, Ramanujacharya, Sridhara and others. So many persons, that is the scholastics. So scholasticism is the great learning, the scholars, the period of the scholars. So quite a few of them, Shankara, Kumariliya, Ramanuja, then Sridhara, Madhava, different persons, and each school will be bearing under according to them. There is a Shankaracharya school of thought is there, Kumariliya school of thought, Madhavacharya school of thought, then Ramanujacharya school of thought, then Sridhara and others. With the passage of time, the ancient literature became nearly incomprehensible. The Vedas expressed in the Chandas and the old of Sanskrit became difficult to follow. Even the interpretation of the sutras posed challenges to the learned scholars. Hence, the scholars wrote commentaries on the ancient literature in general and sutras in particular. As the time moved on, Sanskrit also, that became also not remaining, always becoming new and adapted to the situation. So the old Sanskrit was no more of much in the usage, and therefore it became difficult for the modern scholars to understand what was mentioned there, and therefore a lot of changes took place, and even the interpretation of sutras also became difficult. So the scholars in the scholastic period, they began to write commentaries on the various, that is Vedas as well as the sutras, mainly particularly on the Vedas and particularly in on the sutras. Then a number of commentaries were written. Very often a commentary was written on the original commentary or on the earlier one. Various scholars wrote commentaries on Brahma Sutra according to their own interpretation. So Brahma Sutra, what we have seen in the Badrayana, who wrote the Brahma Sutra, he became an established authority on Brahma Sutra, and that was taken as the source on which the later scholars wrote commentaries. So various scholars wrote commentaries on Brahma Sutra according to their own interpretation. Chief among them were Shankaracharya, Ramanujacharya, Madhavacharya, and incidentally 3 scholars of the Vedantas are developed. So 3 types of Vedantas are developed according to them: Shankara, Ramanuja and Madhava. Shankara's Advaita Vedanta, Ramanuja's Vishishtadvaita, and Madhavacharya's Dvaita Vedanta. So 3 types of Vedanta. Vedanta means end of Vedas, or we can say that is called also the Upanishad teaching, that is the philosophy. So that is the important element to be seen there. In Vedanta philosophy, the Swarup of Brahma is referred as Satchidananda, Sat Chit Ananda. Brahman is Satchidananda, that is Sat Chit Ananda. Existence of pure consciousness, pure bliss. Brahman is eternal, immutable, inexpressible, and unthinkable pre-existence. But it is not the cause of the creator of the universe. So the understanding of Brahman, what is that, or who is he, Brahman? So that is what we see in the Vedanta. So we have 3 Vedantas according to 3 Acharyas, that is Shankara, Ramanuja and Madhava. So each of them trying to have or interpreting the Brahman in a different way. One is Advaita, then one is Vishishtadvaita, and one is Dvaita Vedanta. So then the whole interpretation is between the 2, that is the Brahman and Atman, the 2 terms so that which we find in the Vedanta philosophy, the relation between the 2. Brahman, the highest; Atman, the particle of, that is in the human being. That is the relation between the 2 of them, Brahman and Atman. Atman is the inmost self or spirit of man, but different from the empirical ego. Atman is the fundamental, ultimate, eternal, immutable, pure consciousness. Thus, it appears that Brahman is the ultimate reality behind all world objects, and Atman is the pure spirit in all beings. So the whole philosophy, that is Vedanta philosophy, is about the relationship between Brahman and Atman. Truly speaking, both Brahman and Atman are not different realities. They are identical. For practical purposes, they are referred to separately, which they are not. They are the eternal, all-pervading realities underlying the existence. They are two different labels, but of one and same reality behind the objects, all matter and being, or all beings of the universe. So there is another terminology that is used is the Maya. So we have Brahman, Atman, Maya. Maya is the unique power or the Shakti of Brahman. Maya is the Tri Gunatmika. It has three gunas or attributes. But Shuddha Brahman is Nirguna, is free from attributes. Shuddha Nirguna Brahman alone is the supreme reality. So Brahman has got two concepts, that is Nirguna Brahma and Saguna Brahma. Nirguna Brahma, Brahma in its pure existence, without any qualities, any qualification, as he is, as it is the pure. So the supreme reality. When Nirguna Brahma comes to accuse Maya and acknowledges the gunas of Maya, it is known as Saguna Brahman. So Saguna Brahman is God, the creator, sustainer, destroyer of the world. Saguna Brahman is Ishvara, or a personal God. Man worships God in different forms and names. So all the attributes which we give to Brahman, that is qualifying him, and that is called Saguna Brahma. Brahman with all the qualities. God is good, kind, merciful, and all these attributes which we give, and these are, or this is called the Saguna Brahma, because human being as we are, limited. We need some kind of tangible ways of explaining what or who God is. So Nirguna Brahma, it is for people who can think, or even without the qualities they are able to visualize, or in their inner eye they are able to have that grasp of who is Brahman. So the qualified Brahman is the creation of a human intellect, the sense to understand. If you are to say, that means without any color or the form and shape, it's very hard to grasp what is Brahman like. And therefore the Saguna, the qualities, all the gunas are attributed to Brahma to make him more or less like, as we would understand, a person. So that is the Saguna Brahma. Nirguna Brahma, Brahma devoid of all those. The color and form is devoid of. So Brahma in its pure existence is that, Nirguna Brahma. So we have the three aspects when we speak about the scholastic period. What comes to us is the development of philosophy. So now man is able to think more and more and to understand who is the supreme, or what is the reality, what is the supreme being, and what is the state, or how do you describe the person. So there are different interpretations and given to the Brahman, and then we need to also address the fact of that, whether that which abides in human being, whether that is Brahman itself or something else. So we come with another term, that is of the Atman. So Brahman, Atman, and Maya. Maya is the power, the Shakti of the Brahman. So that's a veiled existence. You seem to see, but then exactly you are not able to. So in order to overcome this we try to give all the qualities to Brahman. So Brahman in its pure existence is Nirguna Brahman, devoid of all the qualities and attributes, and Brahman as such. But that concept is very difficult to grasp. Therefore, we attribute qualities, and therefore we understand that the Saguna Brahma is the God, the creator, then the sustainer, the destroyer of the world, and Saguna Brahma is also Ishwar, the personal God, and all that. So those things are given in such a way that a human being is able to grasp or understand that. So these are the four periods which we go through in the history of Indian philosophy. The epic period, the Vedic period, epic period, Sutra period, and scholastic period. So these four periods in the history gives us a glimpse into how things have come into the present stage. From the Vedic period to epic period to Sutra period and ending up in the scholastic period. The scholastic period, we see a lot of activities taking place in the intellectual level. So we have different types of philosophy coming into. We are trying to understand the Brahman, the highest or the only principle, or the reality that which is existing and which is time immemorial and anadi. It means no beginning, no end. It continues to be there. So that is understanding of Brahman. Then we also have attributed to the Brahman Saguna and Nirguna. So Nirguna Brahman in its pure existence without any quality. To understand that Nirguna Brahma only, we are trying to give the various qualities attributed to the same one and the same reality, that is Brahman. So we have Saguna and Nirguna, without qualities and with qualities. So those are the terms. Then Maya is the veiled existence or the power of the Brahman, and what we experience here and around, and that is the attributes that is given to. So three terms we need to remember in the scholastic period, that is Brahman, Atman, and Maya. From here we move on to one more aspect in the philosophy, the Indian philosophy, that is the role of sannyasa. What is sannyasa? So with that we shall close that of the introduction to Indian philosophy, and we move on to the importance of Vedas. As we have said, in the Vedic period, the four important Vedas are there: Rig Veda, Yajur Veda, Samaveda, Atharva Veda. We try to see a little more deeper about that. So prior to that, in the introduction, let me also include a little bit about the sannyasa. So the meaning of sannyasa or renunciation in Hinduism. In Hinduism, renunciation or sannyasa is the true mark of spirituality. It is believed to be the simple and straightforward way to achieve moksha or liberation. So what is the goal in the life of man? We have seen the four goals: artha, kama, dharma, moksha. So all this leading, all the other three, that is artha and kama leading to dharma, and dharma finally ending up in moksha. So the goal of the Indian philosophy is that of the liberation, the moksha. How do you attain the liberation? And why do we speak of liberation? Because there is bondage. And how does the bondage come? Because of avidya. And how does the avidya come? Because of the desire, or your deeper clinging on to the phenomenal world as it is seen, and you give it a coloring of that is of the permanency, and thus you get fixed. And then it speaks of the number of life, that means the rebirth which is going to happen, till you are able to get rid of all the karmas in your life, and then join into that infinite ocean, that is of the Brahman. So the true nature of a person is that Aham Brahmasmi, you and Brahman, it's one and the same. Now as an existence you see separate. That's the power of the Maya. You are not able to see the true identity. So what you are looking or what you are searching for is the true identity of yours. So a person has to realize that yes, I come to the realization of that. Sannyasa is a form of or a method of that. And as we have the 4 goals of life, there are 4 stages of human life also is visualized in Indian philosophy. That is Brahmacharya, Grahastha, Vanaprastha, Sannyasa. So there are 4 goals for human existence: Artha, Kama, Dharma, Moksha. So Artha and Kama leading to Dharma, Dharma leading to Moksha. That is the goal. Then there are 4 stages spoken in our understanding of human being in those 4 stages. That is Brahmacharya, Grahastha, Vanaprastha and Sannyasa. So we're speaking about Sannyasa, that is the final stage wherein a man leaves behind all the worldly things and goes in search of that which is his identity to join that. So that is the understanding of this, the sannyasa, the renunciation. So people follow the path of sannyasa or renunciation are expected to lead a very austere and ascetic lives, settling aside all desires and comforts and acknowledging no relationship whatsoever, including the relationship with God and oneself. One has to forego all facts of self-preservation and self. So there are different stages that is shown. Brahmacharya, that is a student life, and the best part of one's life is dedicated for that learning. Then comes to the Grahastha, the settled life, wherein a man gets at the household activities. He has got family, children and all that. Then Vanaprastha. So slowly he is settling all the or making provisions for wife, children and all, settling his life here on earth, and then slowly moves into a seclusion. And sannyasa is the total cut off all the relation, nothing more. He has settled, he has left the world, he is in search of the truth. So that is the 4th stage of one's, and therefore the goal, he is moving ahead in order. That is different stages also that is mentioned in such a way or regularized in such a way that is full of, one is full of the beginning, full of activities, slowly it is coming down and then finally reaching to a point wherein you are a nomad. Advancement and the need to further one's ego and identity. Some sects of Hinduism encourage their initiatives to develop equanimity, selflessness through extreme measures such as engaging in unusual acts of self-abasement to attract public, include the criticism or willfully subjecting equanimity of indifference. It is also to keep the ego under check and avoid self-importance. So different methods are used here in the sannyasa in order to make oneself free from all that is in the world and going ahead with that which is the most important in his life, to merge with that is Brahman, that is a true identity. Then we can also, there is a certain things about the sannyasa in the Vedic tradition. Sannyasa is also recognized in Hinduism as one of the 4 ashramas of stages of in the life of a human being. The other 3 being Brahmacharya, the life of a celibate or a student life, Grahastha, life of a householder, and Vanaprastha, life of the retirement or the forest recluse. Sannyasa or the life of renunciation comes at the end. So sannyasa or the renunciation comes at the end. After an individual spends his life in acquiring knowledge as a student and becoming a householder, to perform his obligatory duties towards himself, his parents, his family, and society, he reaches a stage where he thinks he has done his part and fulfilled his obligations. Then he may withdraw from the activity of life to spend the rest of his life in the search of liberation according to Vedas. So all this aspect will show the real way which is to be sought after. So the 4 stages what we see in the ashramas of life, that is brahmacharya, grahastha, vanaprastha and sannyasa, wherein the sannyasa is the one of total giving up, nothing more to hold on. So sannyasa is a life of complete hardship, a self-imposed exile from the comforts of life, a total self-abnegation and willful surrender to fate without complaint, motive or expectation. So in the sannyasa what you see is that a total getting away from, so nothing, so indifference, that means not going to be affected by plus or minus. His equanimity is maintained here. So this with this few things what we can say is that the growth that has come into is that of the real development of, or the introduction to Indian philosophy, telling us that what is going to be the main element, that is a person has to really grow into the true identity of his, that is recognizing the identity of the human being, that is his life is in Brahman, that's Parabrahma. He has to go and get that. Then only the end comes. So with this we stop the classes on Introduction to Indian Philosophy. Next one we go on to that of the Vedas.